All right, good afternoon to all of you. My name is Darshan Shantamurthy. I hope all of you are able to see my screen. Thanks for taking time off for this webinar today. Our topic is on mobile payment application security. We appreciate the fact that we have got all of you today. You know, kind of a full webinar with many participants on this interesting topic today. Um, I'm also joined with my colleague Renju Verghese for this webinar, and we will also be taking questions as we speak. In case there are any questions, feel free to type that in the question window. And in case you're having any challenging hearing us or having any technical glitch, please mail across to marketing at sisainfosec.com. All right. Assuming that I guess all of you are able to hear it and see my screen, I go on to the next slide. Uh, as I said, in case you have any questions during the webinar, you could actually type that in the small chat window on the right hand side of your screen of the GoToMeeting or rather the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll be taking all the questions at the end of this webinar. It's a 1 hour webinar, so we hope to close this in 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes, and leave the rest for any of the questions that you may have on this topic. Just a couple of quick slides on SISA. As many of you would know, we are a payment security specialist company. We've been the leaders in the payment security space across the globe. We work in about 30 countries for about 300 odd organizations, securing their critical infrastructure. And then, of course, we are a PCI. We were the first PCI qualified security assessor. Then went on to be the first PA5 in Asia, and of course we are a PAQSA and a PCI ASV. And then recently we've also got the accreditation of being a PIN security assessor for Visa. So all in all, we've been able to cover a lot of ground in terms of payment security, and we are proud to be part, being having played a small part in the security of payments that happens not just on cards but even non-card payments at this point in time. And then, of course, we've been working with a number of industry verticals, starting with retail, e-commerce, some of the leading information technology, software development companies, airlines, telecom, healthcare, and then, of course, we have our delivery locations across the globe, and namely US, APAC, and the Middle East. That's a short about CISA. And then, of course, we follow a synergistic security model, which includes consulting, automation, and training, which is largely the way we actually do. And this training, doing this webinar is one such way of actually ensuring that many of our customers and the industry at large is able to we disseminate many of the information that we actually gather as part of our audits or as part of our interaction with number of customers across the globe. This is one way wherein we can actually share our inputs, at the same time, get information from many of you who are doing this activity on a day in and day out basis. So it's kind of a good interaction platform for us, and we do this quite often, and we are glad to actually have all of you today as part of this webinar. This is myself, Darshan Shantamurthy. I work as the Chief Executive Officer of the company, and then I have my colleague Renju Verghese, who is the Principal Consultant at CISA. About myself, I was the first PCI QSA for the PCI standards body, and then since onwards, payment security is my area of specialization. I've also been, a risk assessment specialist trained at Carnegie Mellon, and since then, I also run the company CISA. Renju has been principal consultant for long with the company, and he is also a PCI QSA, a PA QSA. He's also a payment forensic investigator and a Visa PIN security assessor as well. So we're glad to do this webinar, both of us, and hope we have an interesting session. We look forward to any feedback from you on this webinar, as well as on any questions that you have. I know that time is limited, so we may not be able to answer all your questions, or in case we run out of time, then you can always feel free to shoot an email to marketing at sisainfosec.com, and we'll be able to come back to you over the email, or we'll probably give you a call back for any of the questions that we are not able to take it during this webinar. All right, so with that quick note, to get started off on this webinar, mobile payment application is the in thing today. Lee said that the payment applications, our payment industry as such has been innovating, tremendously. Gone are the days wherein the payment industry was, the age-old way of making payments. Today, the new era of payments have started, and we all know for sure that the payment industry landscape is going to change. What is going to survive, what is going to be the next way in which we are going to make payments is, of course, uncertain. But what is certain for sure is that the way in which the payment applications or the payments are going to be made across are going to change. And so that shows that the innovation is on the like someone said, I think the payment space is going to revolutionize the entire way in which we're going to make payments. And one thing that we might need to keep in mind is that the way payments are going to change are going to be very region specific as well. They may not be standard across the globe. Say, for example, if the US moves to NFC kind of payments, they may, since they are moving from max strip to EMV, and then from because the EMV will be a little bit of friction, they might what being spoken about is that it may straight away leapfrog to the NFC technology. But for Asia and the rest of Asia Pacific region, the way the payments will change, maybe on mobile payments will become the in thing in a different way. May not be NFC alone, but maybe mobile wallets, maybe normal apps making payments. So we are seeing a lot of traction. What we see, being an organization which is in the assurance process as far as mobile payment applications are concerned, we are seeing a lot of organizations, startups, existing companies, telcos come out with new payment products around mobile. Of course, keeping mobile as the center focus of technology. And of course, everyone wants to ride on the 3 billion devices that are going to exist at this point in time. Many of them are going to be smartphones. Um, and of course, the fact is that there are so many applications out there. Almost about 1.6 million Android applications and 1.5 million applications in the App Store. So this webinar on mobile application security has been one of the things that you guys, all of you, have requested, and we are happy that we've been able to get this webinar organized based on your request. And it's very encouraging to note that we have a full house here with respect to the webinars. I'm really happy that many of you have shown so much interest. In case for some reason you are not able to kind of take the best use of this, I know some of you have not been able to log in because we are maxed out with respect to the webinar. But in case you have some challenges, we would be happy to do. We are also doing one more webinar later today for the US. Please feel free to join in at that point in time as well. Okay, so Renju, do you want to start off?
Sure. Thanks, Darshan. Thanks for the introduction. So let's start with the anatomy of the mobile attacks. So as illustrated in this slide, the mobile attack can involve at various layers like the device layer, network layer, data center, or can be combination of all the three. Internet platform vulnerabilities and social engineering continues to pose a major opportunities for the attackers and has been providing significant challenges for protecting the user data. So coming back to the various attack vectors, we basically have three attack vectors which the malicious parties can exploit, which are mainly the device, the network, and the data center. So as the uh, one second, yeah. So as the webinar is on mobile applications, we will be basically talking about on how to secure the application layer. So before that, let me go in detail on the various vectors which or various vectors which can be there in the device layer. Device means the smartphone. So whether it's an iPhone or an Android, attackers targeting the device itself can use a variety of entry points like the browsers, phone SMS, third-party applications, operating systems, or even the radio frequencies such as the Bluetooth and other common channels. But these days, what you're seeing is that most of the attack vectors is being basically on the browser layer and on the third-party application layer. The radio frequency, such as the Bluetooth and other common channels, have been is very minimal these days. Now, in case of a browser-based attacks, we have various attacks like phishing, which basically involves acquiring the personal information such as the usernames, passwords, and the card details by masquerading as a trusted entity, either through email spoofing, etc. Research has shown that mobile users are 3 times more likely than desktop users to submit personal information to phishing websites. It's likely due to the scaled down environment in a mobile browser which runs it. Basically, it has very limited real estate so that it only shows a small portion of the URLs and it has limited warning dialogues and which also has a lot of less of interface indicators to highlight that the address bar or the address are different. While in case another type of attack on the browser layer is basically the framing, which involves delivering a website in an iframe, which can enable a wrapper site. That's means more like a hybrid application to execute the clickjacking attacks. So, so there are a lot of various exploits which can be exploited through the browser layer. But more importantly, the application-based attacks have been on the increase. So just for a 2014 for study conducted by the VIA Forensics, it has been found that 83% of all the popular applications have stored the data insecurely within the device. That means whether it's going to be the username or any kind of end user information is getting stored on the mobile devices, which can be used by the malicious user. Then, on related to the application-based vulnerabilities, there are maybe no encryption or weak encryption. Applications that allow transmission of unencrypted or weakly encrypted data are again subject to the attacks. Other major issue is basically a configuration manipulation, which includes gaining unauthorized access to the admin interface or configuring the stores and retrieving of any latest config data, etc. And there is the dynamic runtime injection, which allows an attacker to manipulate and abuse the runtime of an application to bypass security by logs, bypass the logic checks, access privilege parts, and even steal data stored within the memory, and various escalated privileges, etc. So the above list are just basically some of the common vulnerabilities which affect the security of the mobile applications. And in this webinar, our focus will be basically on how to is basically on talking about how to develop a secure mobile applications and what are the basic measures which we need to consider as a developer while developing the application so that most of these common vulnerabilities are mitigated.
Yeah, just to add, I think this becomes of great significance when you actually have payment data on the mobile. We have seen instances wherein some of the apps actually are storing sensitive authentication data, or are used to process sensitive authentication data like the CVV2, which is used for so sometimes we've seen applications which store CVV2 on the app because of users' convenience, so that it's frictionless. And But at the same time, we have seen CVV2 being prompted, which is then becomes an important factor as to how it is dealt when it is processed and submitted onto the to the card processing environment. So these kinds of attacks become very very prevalent, especially the secure storage and secure transmission when it comes to payment applications, because it's just not about the username password, but it's also about the card data, or for that matter even your account data, that becomes very critical at this point in time.
Sure. So moving on, basically there are mainly three different types of mobile applications. They are the web, native, and the wrapper or the hybrid type. The web basically are mobile applications that operate via a general purpose web browser, sometimes referred to as the mobile sites. These are the mobile equivalent to functional web applications that have proliferated in the past decade, offering many capabilities such as the online banking or the shopping feature. Although a regular website can be used in the mobile web browsers, these days many companies now create a separate mobile web app or a mobile site for optimizing the mobile attributes like the smaller screen size, touch-based navigation, and basically the availability of GPS location. While in case of a native applications are basically installed applications that operate of the native mobile device operating system, that is Android or the iOS. These applications are basically compiled for the specific mobile platform and leverage the mobile OS APIs for most of their functionings. These are typically, though not always, downloaded and installed via like the app markets like the Play Store and the App Store. And the third kind, which is the most common type, is the wrapper or the hybrid type. Wrapper application basically are a native applications and they leverage the web pages inside the applications. So for simple example, if you take the example of Book My Show, it's a hybrid application where most of the it is a native application. While in case if you're going to enter the credit card information or the 3D secure, the web page gets integrated within the application itself. So these are basically the three types of application. Now, as you have seen in the slide, we have listed down around 15 steps or measures which needs to be considered by the developers while developing the mobile application. To make it simpler, we have categorized the measures into three different categories. Basically, the coding practices to follow. The second will be on how to handle the sensitive data. And the three will be what to do for catching and logging. Sensitive data, which we have mentioned, can be any data and is based on the mobile application. But please note that any data which can be related to the user needs to be classified as sensitive data. Example like the username, password, card number, mobile number, address, any health related information, address, etc. So any data which can be related to a user has to be classified as a sensitive data. Reason is that apart from just securing the device, we have to ensure that the privacy of the user are also not compromised, as there are a lot of various uh, privacy issues either in the US and the UK. So we have to ensure that while you're developing the application, the privacy of the user are not compromised. For example, using a lot of the GPS location data within the mobile and sharing it can lead to a privacy issue. So these are some of the points. So what we'll do is that let's examine each of these points in detail now. Sure. So the first one is basically increasing the code complexity and use obfuscation. Reason is that if you have reverse engineered an application, basically a mobile application, then you can find that these are once you've done the reverse engineering, you can find valuable insights into how the mobile application works. So, as part of our testing process, we basically do reverse engineering the entire mobile application to identify how the application functions and what are the various checks within that particular application. So, this reverse engineering technique will give us a very good uh, insight or very good overview on the function of the application and the various security measures which is being involved. So this will yeah. But if we make them more complex internally, then you put it you make it more difficult for attackers to see the clear operation of the application, which may reduce the number of attack vectors. So in some cases, what we should get is that the entire mobile app is encrypted. The code is encrypted so that we don't understand what is the application flow or how the application functions. So that's how. So for example, in one of the mobile app testing, when we did a reverse engineering, we were able to identify how the application was doing the checksum value, and based on that, we were able to do a replay attack because we able to understand how they was carrying out the integrity check. While reverse engineering of an Android app like the .apk file is easily achieved, and we can easily identify the internal workings of the application. While in case of an iOS application, they are also susceptible to the reverse engineering attacks due to the way they are designed. So, for example, an app, and iOS application classes and protocols are stored within the object file, which basically allows an attacker to fully map out the application design. So, basically, it's the Objective C itself is basically a reflective language, and it's capable of perceiving and modifying its own state. So, an attacker with the right tools will be able to perceive and modify the state of the application in the same way that a runtime manages the application. So, all we have to do is that basically incorporate a simplistic messaging framework that's very easily traceable, and it can be manipulated to intercept or even tamper with the runtime of an application. Relatively simple attacks can be used to manipulate the Objective-C runtime so that it can bypass the authentications, the various policy checks, or any internal application sanity checks which is implemented within the application. While in case of on what are the remediation that we need to incorporate is basically if the application handles very highly sensitive data, then consider implementing anti-debug techniques. The anti-debug technique will ensure that even if you do the debugging of the application, then it is not even if you do the debugging of the application, it is not the output is not does not have much details, and the attacker will have very less information for decoding the application. So various techniques do exist for the anti-debug techniques, which can increase the complexity of reverse engineering the code. One of the technique is to basically is to use C, C++ to limit easy runtime manipulation by the attacker. So there are ample C and C++ libraries that are very mature and can be easily integrated with the Objective C and the Android JNI options. On iOS, on the iOS application, consider writing a critical portion of code in low-level C so that it can avoid exposure and manipulation by the Objective C runtime. And we can also consider obfuscating all the sensitive application code wherever feasible by running an automated code for obfuscating the program for obfuscating the code. There are a lot of obfuscating programs like the third-party commercial softwares or even the open source solutions are available as well. So using the we can basically obfuscate the code so that when we do the reverse or when the attacker does the reverse engineering of the application, he will not be able to go through the code or will be able not able to understand how the application functions. Another point which you need to consider is basically is to ensure logging is disabled as logs may be integrated with other application and with other application. So, for example, if there are a lot of Android applications where it can read another application system logs. So, ensure that we have less number of logging implemented. Another option of obfuscating the or increasing the code complexity is restricting the debuggers. Uh, Basically, by incorporating a system call, an application can specify that the operating system should not permit a debugger to the attached to the particular specific process. So, for example, by preventing a debugger from attaching the capabilities of an attacker to interfere with the lower-level runtime objects are limited. So the attacker must first then try to circumvent the debugging restrictions in order to attack the application on the low level. This is basically a further complexity that we invoke so that the attacker doesn't succeed. So in the restricting debugger option, basically the Android applications have something called as the Android debuggable equal to false, which can be set in the application manifest, which will prevent the easy runtime manipulation by an attacker or the malwares. Another option is trace checking. Trace checking is basically, if implemented, the application can determine whether or not it is currently being traced by a debugger or other debugging tools. If being traced, then the application can perform any number of possible attack response actions, such as, say, discarding the encryption keys, notifying a server administrator, or deleting the user data within the mobile app, or any other type of response in an attempt to defend itself. All these options, that's the trace checking, the anti-debugging techniques, uh, or the obfuscating the code. There are various libraries, both commercial as well as open source, which can be implemented within the application. Sure. Now the next one is basically having simple logic tests in code, which may lead to an attack. So, for example, let's consider a logic test like, say, if section trusted is equal to 1. This is a very simple logic test, and if an attacker can change that value 1 maybe to 0, then they can circumvent the security controls. Apple iOS has been attacked using this type of weakness, earlier, and the Android apps have had their own the Dalvik binaries being patched up to circumvent various protection mechanism which has been goes to simple logic test. So these logic tests are easy to circumvent at on many levels. For example, on an assembly level, all an attacker can attack the iOS application using only a debugger to find the right CBZ. CBZ is compare and branch on zero, or CBNZ, which is compare and branch on non-zero instructions. So basically, if using the iOS, just using a debugger, the attacker he will be able to identify, okay, specific symbol logic exists, and maybe reverse it. So in this above example, if the section is trusted is equal to 1, he can reverse it to 0 and circumvent the application or compromise the application. So this kind of attack can be performed in the runtime as well as by simply traversing the object memory address and changing its instance variables as the application runs. On Android, the application can be decompiled and the branch condition patched can be patched before recompiling and launching the application. So it can be more of a malicious application, or within the same application itself, all the checks can be breached. So what to do? Well, so the remediation is basically considering a better programming paradigm where privileges are enforced by the server when the section is not trusted, or by preventing certain data from being decrypted, or if possible, uh, so basically possible ensures that application gets decrypts data only once it determines that the section is trusted. Section is trusted either using a challenge response or an OTP or any other forms of authentication. In addition, it is recommended to declare all the sanity checks functions as static inline. With this approach, they are compiled in line, making it more difficult to patch out. That is, an attacker cannot simply just override a function or patch one function. This technique could require the attacker to seek out and patch every instance of the check from the application, increasing the record complexity for an attack. Another method of remediating is basically integrating techniques such as encryption, timed callbacks, and flow-based programming for adding the complexity for an attacker. So the techniques which we have mentioned here is basically for identifying, or basically for helping out in the section management as well. The other is basically the third-party libraries. Most of the developers rely heavily on the third-party libraries. Hence, it is very important to thoroughly probe and test all the libraries before incorporating into the code. Third-party libraries can contain vulnerabilities and weakness, and most cases the developers assume that third-party libraries are well developed and tested. However, issues can and do exist in all those third-party libraries as well. So, what should we do? Make sure that we do security auditing. We do a thorough security auditing for all the third-party libraries, which includes not just the security feature but also the functionality as well, and ensure that we when we mention as the third-party libraries, this should also include the core iOS and Android code or libraries. Even if you're upgrading to a new version of a third-party library, or upgrade to a new OS version, you should treat these as the new versions of your application. Reason is that an updated third-party library can contain new vulnerabilities or expose issues within its code. They should be tested just like how you test our new code on the application. So that's on the third-party library front. The other technique for secure development is basically implementing an anti-tamper technique. So basically, all the applications can be tampered with or can be backdoored. Backdoor in the sense the malicious attacker can include a backdoor within the application and then resign the application and publish either through third-party markets. So basically, these attacks are found in case of very popular applications and financial applications. Attackers are basically are known to insert malicious functionality within the application and then publish these malicious versions to through third-party markets. So how do you prevent the this kind of attacks? What we can do is that we can employ something called as the anti-tamper or the tamper detection techniques, so that it prevents the illegitimate applications from running. The We can use the checksums, digital signatures, or any other kind of validation mechanisms on the files to ensure that these files have not been tampered with. Attempt to manipulate the application without perceiving a correct checksum can be used to prevent illegitimate execution. Please note that these kind of techniques, that is, the using checksum, are not foolproof and can be bypassed by a sufficiently motivated attacker. But these measures will ensure that it increases the time required for breaching the application and will in effect will also frustrate an attacker from attacking our application. Another option is basically the application can silently wipe its user data, keys, or other important data whenever any tampering is detected, basically to further challenge the attacker. Similarly, if an application identifies that it has been tampered with, then it can notify an administrator as well. So this is the various methods on which we can prevent the tampering of the application. On the Android, the public key that's been used to sign an application can be read from the application certificate, and we can be used to verify that whether the application was signed with the developer's private key. So this will ensure that the someone else has tampered or resigned the application. This comparison will fail, thus detecting that application has been tampered with. Other details are yeah. Other details are basically securely storing the sensitive data in the RAM. So basically, during the application use, the user or application specific data could be stored in the RAM, and it may not be clearly or it may not be properly cleared out upon the user logout or the section timeout. In case of an Android, because an application stays in the memory after use, the data, like the sensitive data, will be there within the memory until the memory is either reclaimed. So sensitive data like the encryption keys or the user credentials might be there in the memory. So what's the risk? Basically, if an attacker who finds or can steal the device will be able to attach a debugger and dump the memory from the application or and hence will be able to retrieve these keys and credentials.
Just to add to that, this is the same attack which was prevalent in the retailer in the US who got breached. I think the memory scraping attack is quite popular, and we are seeing this in many of our forensic investigations as well. That the memory scraping attacks are quite popular. And now we are seeing that in processors and e-commerce merchants as well. So this is something which becomes very relevant even on the mobile app space. So yeah, just to add that, Ranju.
Sure. Thanks, Deepesh. So, how shall we remediate that? Basically, if you're using a sensitive data such as the encryption keys, then ensure that you don't keep them in the RAM longer than required. All the variables which holds all the sensitive information should be nullified after use. So basically, either we can call it a null function, or we usually recommend to replace the variables with zeros, and avoid using any immutable objects for sensitive keys such as the such sensitive keys or the passwords like the Java language string, and instead favor the character array. This is because even when the references to the immutable objects are removed or nulled, they will be still will be they uh, they will might be still be the memory until a garbage collection is being called upon. But unfortunately, the garbage collection cannot be forced by the application. Hence, it is better that instead of the immutable objects, that we use a character array and nullify those all the variables once they apply on exiting that specific function. Please note that if there's any sensitive data is there, ensures that we exit or we nullify the variables once we exit the function, and not the entire, not while exiting the application. Yes, we have to also nullify it after while exiting, but ensures that while exiting the function, we nullified all those variables. The other point to note is that on how the data gets deleted once it's been called. So, for example, in Android, calling file.delete function will not securely erase the file and securely erase the file as long as it is not overwritten. So, traditional approaches to overwriting a file generally do not work on mobile device due to the aggressive management of the NAND flash memory. So, as a developer, we should assume that any data returned to a device can be recovered. In some instance, encryption might add an additional layer of protection so that even if the data is not deleted, it will at least ensure that the data is encrypted within the storage. Another method, which is not advisable for most of the application, is to see whether we may be able to delete a file and then overwrite all the available space, basically create a larger file, which could force the NAND flash or the flash memory to erase all the unallocated space. The drawback of this technique might involve like wearing out the flash drive, causing the application or the entire device to respond very slowly, and can have significant power consumption as well. So that's the reason why it is not advisable. But what we recommend is basically to ensure that we totally avoid storing any sensitive information on the device, and if you're storing any information, ensures that it is encrypted during storage, so that even if you delete it, the data will be an encrypted file or encrypted data. Other point is basically to avoid the query string for uh, sensitive data. For example, there was a major bank breach was executed with a simple query string modification attack. So in this case, since the entire account details was sent over from the mobile app as a query to the to the backend server, and by just changing the account number while querying it, the attacker were able to breach uh, the mobile the bank's mobile application. Other thing is that query strings or the query string parameters are basically more visible and can be often be unexpectedly be cached or logged in various places like the web history, web server, proxy logs, etc. So if these query string contains sensitive data, then the sensitive data might be stored in most of these locations. So remediation. Before that, using an unencrypted query string for any meaningful data should be avoided as well. For example, if the credentials are transmitted as query string parameters, then opposed to the in the body as a post request, then again credential strings or credentials will be liable to be logged in various places like the user's browser history, the web server logs, and logs of any reverse proxies which is being deployed within the hosting infrastructure. And if the attacker gets access to these logs, then he will have the credentials which can lead to an escalation privilege attack. So, what's the remediation? The remediation is basically to use uh, secure post method for sending the user data with an SSFR token protection. The post data is not logged by default in areas where the query string can be found, but ensures that whether it's the post or the get request you're sending, that we use temporary section cookies. Encrypting another method is basically encrypting the data using a not using a encrypting data, basically encrypting data along with the temporary section key can help prevent a replay attack. So, for example, instead of just relying on the SSL or the TLS certificate, ensures that we encrypt the data before we send it out to the server side. So, even if it gets logged, again, only the encrypted information is logged. Sure. So that was some of the coding practices that we talked about. Now we talk about basically the handling the sensitive data.
Right. So, I mean, when we talk about sensitive data, essentially when we're looking at payment applications, we are talking about card information, we're talking about CVV2, we're talking about expiration date, and of course, we are talking about certain cases wherein we are entering the PIN or the PIN block. I mean the one-time passwords or any of those, or for that matter, a PIN. Certain cases of password resets being done. So one of the effective practices is, of course, not to store that cache data. But when it comes to user convenience, one of the things that is prompting many of the developers is to store this data locally on the app itself. So if you look at the PCI requirement essentially says you're not supposed to store sensitive authentication data, but then the app is outside the scope of the PCI DSS. So for an X organization is actually PCI compliant. The only thing that comes within the scope is the development of that mobile app, which is going to be given to consumers. But the actual storage of CVV2, in the mobile app, since being outside the purview of PCI, that ways can get away. But what is not recommended is to store the CVV2 locally, or for that matter, any sensitive data locally should not be stored on the mobile app itself. And then make sure that they do not persist in memory. I think Renju spoke about it sufficiently long enough that the data should not be persistent, beyond the transaction completion. So once the moment the transaction is completed, it should get deleted across board. And of course, in the RAM also, it needs to be secure at the end of the day, and should not be susceptible to any kind of memory scraping attacks. Needless to say, encryption is one of the key components that needs to be taken care. And just like encryption is important, so is the case with key management. And effective key management becomes a problem because the secure. So typically, what happens is, in a non-mobile kind of environment, wherein you have pin entry devices, or you have a point of entry for any of the sensitive authentication data, They are typically, kind of can provide for secure cryptographic devices, where we what we call as SCD devices. But in a mobile app or a mobile form factor, we are not able to have those kinds of SCD devices. So that kind of poses kind of a different challenge from a security perspective, and that's one of the reasons why handling sensitive data through the mobile app becomes a lot more challenging than a traditional payment acceptance form, which may be, from a point of sale, a PED or a PIN entry device, or such as an ATM or a EDC terminal, because this is not custom made for payment acceptance. It's a general form factor which has been there with you, where we talk or where we do that. And then, of course, these are other best practices that we have. Do not store temp or cache data. And then, of course, ensure sensitive data are not visible in the cache logs. And also use time based type of control, which will wipe sensitive data after a mobile device once the application has not communicated with its servers for a given period of time. So we have seen this with certain applications can also does something, some concepts like store and forward at some points in time when the server is not reachable or for some purposes. So those kinds of things are something that you need to consider when the sensitive authentication data is there. Uh, yeah, Ranjit, you want to just quickly go through this?
Sure,
We have another 2-3 minutes before we open up for questions.
sure, fine. The other is basically protecting the application settings. So, in case of an iOS, you'll find that the application settings are is mentioned in the plist files, which can be compromised in some situations. In case of an Android developers often use the store settings, the application settings in the shared preference of the XML file or in the within the SQLite database, which if not encrypted, which are not encrypted by default, and can be read or modified by the with or without the root permissions. So one of the remediations that we suggest is that to ensure that we compile the settings into the uh, code itself. Basically, because there is a very little benefit for configuring the application settings via the plist files in case of an iOS or in case in the SQLite database. Since any changes to the configuration must be bundled and deployed as a new application anyway. So including this instead, if we include the configuration within the app code, then which will require more time and skill for the attackers to modify, but which ensures that it's also secured. So, but if you're storing the it in any config files like the plist file or the SQLite database, then ensures that we encrypt the configuration files uh, using a master key, which is again encrypted using a passphrase that is supplied by the user, so that at any point of time the encrypted data nor the keys is visible with the attacker. Sure. So in case the other point is that in case if you're using TLS uh, for say secure network implementation or transmitting any sensitive data outside the network, then it's not that much recommended. Means yes, we have to use SSL or TLS for encrypted data, but we have to consider the data encryption as well. But please note that SSL has now become outdated, and we have to use TLS version 1.2 if we're going to use HTTPS. So the reason why we don't recommend the using SSL certificate is that in the recent years there's been a lot of breaches of the certification authorities like the Komodo and etc., which has exposed many users to false or trusted certificates. Also, the Apple go to fail bug further exposed the limits of an SSL or TLS reliability for application developers. So, what do you recommend? Yes, please use the TLS for SSLs for creating the HTTPS connection, but also use either asymmetric or symmetric encryption for encrypting the data before you send the data over an HTTPS connection. So this ensures that even if the certificate has been compromised, the data is again transmitted over as an encrypted channel. And the other point is to ensure that we validate the inputs from the mobile app. So even if the data is generated within from your app, it is possible that the data can be intercepted and manipulated. This can lead to, say, the SQL injection or the buffer overflows kind of attack. So, as with any proper web application security, we have to consider that all input from the clients, that's either from the mobile side or from the mobile app, should be treated as untrusted and should be validated before it's been processed at the server side. We can consider using the OWASP ES API libraries basically for sanitizing the data. Another important point to note for all the mobile application is to basically to limit the use of the unique ID details or the UUID. So most mobile devices have the unique ID or the UUID created at time of the manufacturing. This the ability to basically to uniquely identify a device is often important to procure, manage, and secure the data. So what the developers have done is that they have quickly adopted the UUID for device identification, thus making it one of the foundation for security for many systems and applications. Unfortunately, there are several privacy and security issues with this approach. First, many online systems have connected UUID of a device to an individual user, which can enable tracking across applications even when the user is not logged into the application. And apart from that, this UUID can be even be can be even be compromised as well. So if you see the importance of not using UUID, Apple currently have disabled or removed the developer access to UUID, but there was is been currently using the MAC address of the wireless network interface for the unique identification. But so what is the remediation? The remediation is basically to use a app unique device factor at the time of registration or installation. This app unique device factor will be able to this app unique device factor could be required later along with the user authentication to create a section. The device factor could also be used as an additional factor in the encryption routine. So have a app unique device factor generated at time of registration or installation, which will ensure that which can replace the UUID or the MAC address for identifying a specific device. Coming back, the various catching and logging, to ensure that the data can be captured in variety of artifacts, even though it's unintended. Developers basically often overlook some of the ways on which data can be stored, including the log, debug files, cookies, web history, web cache, property list, etc., etc. So the simple way of implementing or remediating is to ensure that we do not store or cache the data. This is the most secure way to avoid data compromise on the device. Same case, same case with the debug logs. So, as most developers like to have the debug logs implemented, they can leak, but is implemented to be implemented in the production environment. But unfortunately, it can leak a lot of sensitive information. So we have to make sure that we disable debug logs while moving into the production environment. Some of the extra points which you need to consider while if you're developing a mobile POS application. A mobile POS application is basically an application which is going to accept the card or uh, basically card data. One of the most important point to ensure is that the card data that you procure or the card data is procured is basically a PCI PTS certified device. If it is not PCI PTS certified device, then it cannot be used for mobile POS applications. So just give it the list, and within the list, there's something called as SCR, which is the secure card reader, and you can just check the devices is listed there for getting the details. So some of the other points is, yes, we have to ensure that the tracking data and the pin block needs to be encrypted using DUKPT, which is Derived Unique Keeper Transaction Encryption Algorithm. We need to ensure that different keys are used for encrypting both track2 and the pin block. And most cases, the PCI device or the SCR will provide APIs which will return just the card number and the last four digits of the card number. So use these APIs for displaying the cardholder details either into the application screen or into the bill. And we have to ensure that both track2 and the pin block needs to be encrypted by the SCR and should be decrypted only at the server side. And if possible, have an HSM or the host security module for decrypting the data in the backend side. And other information like not storing sensitive information and stuff. But please note that all the mobile POS applications needs to undergo PADC's validation as well. So just using this PCI PTS certified device won't just suffice a requirement. All the mobile POS applications which you're going to have has to undergo the PADC's validation service as well.
All
Yeah.
right. So just to add there, I think we've tried to cover as much as possible. We are just on top of the hour here. We also have a CPSID workshop in our part of our training, which covers which is a detailed 2 day workshop on how to do secure payment application development. This workshop is focused towards how payment applications can be developed in a secure way, and what are the controls and security measures that can be considered. And we try to involve and go a little more deeper with case studies and with exercises. By virtue of being a webinar, we have certain limitations within which we operate. So, in case you are interested, we can do the please do join us for the workshop when we conduct the same. So we have a few questions. We are just on top of the hour, but just one or two questions we can take. So Ranju, so So the one question which we have got is, will CISA provide a list of most commonly used tools, commercial and open source, which are used as remediation measures for security measures like anti-tamper techniques, anti-debugging, and code obfuscation?
We can
So
provide that.
yeah, so yes, so we can do it. We would request you to send us a mail. In case you already are in touch with someone at CISA, you can write to them. Or in case you want to reach us, you can write to marketing at cisainfosec.com, the mail ID from where you would got the invite for the webinar. We would try to get it answered internally and then come back to you. So we would be happy to do that. We have lots of questions, and we are really very thankful to all of you. The webinar is actually maxed out, but really, really appreciate this one. So the other question which has come out is, I want to know whether any training available for procedures on mobile black box or white box testing. Uh, there is.
Basically, join CISA.
Yeah, so there is there's no training that we have. CISA at this point in time is doing it, but we would definitely consider this as part of our training program. We do cover some amount of testing for the payment application component of it in our CPSID, which is a CPSID, which is the developer version of the workshop. In case that is what you're looking for, you can do that. Otherwise, that's what CISA is currently offering with respect to the training that we have. It's So we are on top of the hour, and it's unfortunate that we don't have time to take all the questions. We really, really appreciate the fact that we had a full house for this webinar. In fact, we had maxed out, and in case you have not been able to get your question answered, please write to us. We will definitely come back to on your question. And in case, just to also let you know, we have another webinar in case,